So my question is, this buyer-seller agreement, seller's representation agreement, and other is this one, residential purchase contract. How they are like interrelated, like the
Okay,
difference.
sure. So when you are, let's say a buyer comes to you and they say, we would like to buy a house, detached house, 3 bedrooms, 2.5 bathroom in this particular community. So they're coming to you for help with purchasing a house. So this is where first thing you would have them sign would be your consumer relationship guide. So consumer relationship guide will explain the different types of relationships that can be had with a real estate professional, which means it could be a customer or a client relationship. So let's say they say, oh no, we want you to represent us, in which case it will be a client relationship. And this is when you will sign a buyer representation agreement with them. Okay, so then once you get that signed, so you'll get the consumer relationship guide signed and you will get the buyer representation agreement signed. Once that's done, then you will start showing them properties. And then let's say they find a property they really like and they would like to write an offer on it. So the offer is known as a purchase contract. So then you will fill out a purchase contract, and that purchase contract will then go to the seller. Okay, so that's from the buyer side. But let's say you were, somebody came to you and they wanted to list the property. So they say, hey, I want to sell my house. And I want to move somewhere else, right? So in this case, the first thing you would have to do then, or you would do that in that case, would be you would same thing from the seller side now. So you would give them the consumer relationship guide, go through the consumer relationship guide with them and explain the different types of relationships that can be had. So in this case, they want to be a client, then you will sign a seller representation agreement with them. Right? So before we can start working with somebody, we need to get them to sign the service agreement. So the service agreement is known as a seller representation agreement if you are working with a seller, or if you're working from the buyer side, then it will be called a buyer representation agreement. So service agreement include both. Right? So depending on the situation, if you're working with the buyer, then it will be the buyer representation agreement. If you are working with a seller, then it will be the seller representation agreement. So that's how those things come into play. And once you get to the purchase contract, or sorry, offer point, then the buyer's agent will generally fill out the purchase contract on the buyer's behalf, and then they will send it to the seller, and then the seller will basically take a look at whether they want to accept the offer or not.